Yeah.
And so when you're writing a book, right, like they have the concept of the hero's journey, right? And so you've
Right.
got to get the hero to, get the call to adventure, and then they encounter somebody, and like you kind of have this process. Is that true? Is there a template, so to speak? I mean, and that template of the hero's journey when writing a book doesn't help you write the next great American novel, but it does give you a sense for where you have to, how the path will go that other people can get on board with you. Is that same thing go on with game design?
I would say the closest comparison is that there are some core mechanisms that are used in board games. I'll give you an example here, and usually they are used as a jumping off point for both the designer and trying to connect gamers who already know these mechanisms to the game itself. An example of this is a mechanism called worker placement. So in a number of games that use this worker placement mechanism, on your turn, you are taking a little worker token and you're putting it on a certain spot on the board, and that spot on the board says gain $2 or build a building, different actions. And so that is a core framework, and oftentimes game ideas, game designs will start with that core mechanism that is well known to a lot of people in the game industry, and then they put their own twist on that mechanism. So I would say that's probably the closest comparison, because there are so many different themes and paths and different lengths of games. There are games that play in 5 minutes. There are games that play in 10 hours. That's the closest parallel I can think of to the hero's journey, the kind of the rough framework of a novel.
When did you move into the professional side of game development?
Well, I never really thought that I could make a career out of it. And then I started to see, back in maybe 2010, Kickstarter became a thing. Should I talk about what Kickstarter is?
I think people probably know, but you can talk about your experience with it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, it's a crowdfunding platform where you can gauge demand for product, raise funds for it, build community. And I started to see tabletop game projects on this platform. And up until this point, I had designed a few random games just for fun over the course of my life. I hadn't really gone deep into any of the designs. But I was really excited by the Kickstarter platform, really excited to see if I could actually design a game and publish it. And so I designed the game specifically to put on Kickstarter. This was back in 2011 that I started, and I put it on Kickstarter in 2012. And even that, the project was successful, it did well. And even then, and even after the next project I ran, which did much, much better, I didn't picture it as a career, because it just didn't seem like something that could be stable and sustainable.
What were you doing as a career?
I was working at Washington University. We're both here in St. Louis. So I was working as a director of operations at one of the facilities at the WashU campus. So that was my full-time job. This was just something fun that I was doing on the side. And eventually I got to the point where I asked my boss at WashU if I could take one day off a week and earn 20% less and focus that day on Stonemaier games. And it got to the point where I was doing that and still kind of working 40 hours a week on my day job and 40 hours a week on Stonemaier games. And I wasn't fully committing to either one because of that split. And I decided to go for Stonemaier games to save up enough money that I could kind of make it a year and see how I could do if I just focused on it for a year. And I gave that a shot.
Man, so WashU, for people that don't know, this is like the equivalent of Harvard in the Midwest. I mean, it is a major university with a lot of prestige. I think about a guy going not just to your boss, but to anybody that feels like they have an investment in your future and being like, I'm going to switch from WashU to games. What was that like?
Yeah. I mean, that was my feeling of it. It was like, how can I possibly... I had such a steady, secure job. I'm very risk averse. I was very hesitant to make that switch. What really convinced me is that I was using Kickstarter for these original projects. And Kickstarter, you're raising money for basically one print run of a product, whether it's games. There are many different things that you can make on Kickstarter and things that you can fund. Which is great, but it's not sustainable. It's just one thing, one thing that you're making one time. But by the end of 2013, we were reprinting games and still selling those games to distributors. So it was getting into a much broader audience than distribution. And I had some localization partners. I had some partners worldwide that were licensing our games and publishing our games in their languages. So I had this other source of income, other source of revenue coming in. And that's when I kind of looked at my bank account and said, okay, I can do this for a year. And if it all fails, I'll go back and find another job. Hopefully I can maybe get back my old job, get a new job, get something I'm interested in. But I have a year to make this work. And that kind of took that risk away from it a little bit. I had a buffer built up.
So when you say you're risk averse and games that are kind of fun have that thrill of risk and reward, like where's the parallel there for you? Why are you risk averse in the real world and then also a game designer?
That's to me one of the joys about tabletop games, really, that I can be risk averse in real life. I can love structure and organization. But in games, when I play, I almost play the opposite way. I like to play somewhat chaotic strategies. I like to take very risky paths in games that I play. I like that escapist element. And that's I would say one of my greatest maybe pitches for people who want to try tabletop games. It's a way to experiment with very low stakes with something that you wouldn't actually do in real life. That's one of the reasons I love playing games.
As you're saying that, I'm thinking, so I play chess regularly with my father-in-law. I don't play with a ton of other people, but he'll come down to my house or I'll go up to his. And I realize that we reverse the polarity of what we are in regular life. In regular life, I am a rather bold, really big risk taker. But when I'm playing with him, I am super conservative. I am like, don't lose pieces, come back. And he's the opposite, right? Like he's very conservative, does things in a methodical way. But when he plays, it is like a storm coming at you. You have no idea what's about to happen. But I would never have made that deep observation that it is a way to play a role that you wouldn't play in your ordinary life.
Yeah, it's a way to try something that where the stakes in chess are low stakes, right? You lose a game, so what? You start over, you play again. You've lost nothing in real life by playing that strategy. Or trying to
you, it's pretty high to me.
With your father-in-law. Yeah.
Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.